Thank you so much. And I'll just show you my face very quickly. I don't have very good internet connection, so fingers crossed it's okay during this, but because of that, I am going to shut off my camera in just a second. Let me just bring this up. There we go. Okay, is that working? Can you see can everyone just, someone give me a thumbs up. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, just double checking.
Yeah.
All right, so today I'm going to be talking to you about modeling agricultural energy systems at Çatalhöyük. And just to get started right away. So I'm presenting to you today the workings of my PhD research, which seeks to establish a methodology to quantify the energy demands and dissipations of Neolithic Çatalhöyük's agricultural system. And with this presentation, I am hoping to demonstrate the following. So first, that routinely collected archaeological data can be used to quantify and model energy systems in the past. Second, I hope to demonstrate that the early workings of what I designate as the agricultural energy feedback system, and discuss that this is missing from both sustainability and archaeological research. And third, that bringing history into sustainability modeling is not just possible, but it is necessary. So when it comes to our recent unsustainability, current narratives and models tend to focus on climate change and fossil fuel use. However, our quote, unsustainable use of energy and resources has been present throughout human history. Sustainability is not just about climate change or our use of fossil fuels. It involves our society, cultures, lifeways, behaviors, ethics, biodiversity, economics, and materials. To be a sustainable system, these things together must yield social and environmental vitality over time. Now, archaeology deals with many aspects of sustainability. We just do so in the past. And although we have the epistemology, data, and wherewithal to do so, as a discipline, archaeology does not focus on understanding how humanity's energy systems had developed over time. And this is where the agricultural revolution comes in. Now, the agricultural revolution brought on new ensembles of activities, behaviors, and technologies which permitted cultivation, surplus production, and changes in nutrition, workload, mobility, and population growth. And from an archaeological perspective, agriculture profoundly affected social and environmental systems. So can you see my mouse right here on the diagram?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just double checking. So what we have here from an archaeological perspective, we have agriculture causes surplus production, which leads to population growth and settlement sedentism, which has changes in the ritual practice, material culture, technology, diet and nutrition, and animal relationships. And we also have environmental changes here, which affect agriculture, but also agriculture does cause environmental changes. So now, although agriculture the agricultural revolution brought all this, agriculture itself has a significant caveat. Although agriculture provides a way for humans to extract energy, for humans and society to benefit from agriculture, they must invest energy into agricultural processes. Once energy is invested in agriculture and society becomes dependent upon it, more and more energy is required to keep it going. So I'm just going to briefly go over this diagram with you because you're going to be seeing a lot of diagrams throughout this. So from an energetic point of view, populations invest in energy into agriculture, which produces a surplus of energy, which goes back into society, which keeps society going. But then that can help facilitate more population growth and increasing settlement and sedentism. And together, this kind of almost requires an increasing reliance upon agriculture, which leads to the population needing to invest more energy into agriculture. And this cycle goes on and on and on. At the same time, while this is happening, we see changes in diet, nutrition, material culture, technology, animal relationships, ritual practice, and environmental changes. But the thing to keep in mind here is that while this is happening, these environmental changes, which are permanent, are happening early on. So this entire process is what I call the agricultural energy feedback system. And these consequences and changes in energy flows and systems from this agricultural energy feedback more than likely occurred even from the onset of the agricultural revolution, yet they have been undiscussed in archaeology and are absent from our modern understandings of energy and sustainability systems. Archaeology has failed to consider the processes of energy extraction by which the adoption of agriculture took place, the cumulative effects of energy cumulative energy effects of past agricultural processes, and has neglected the relationship between energy, settlement growth, and subsistence pathways. Give you a break from diagrams with some nice pictures. So now, looking more in depth with agriculture, agriculture itself, its processes like land clearance, tillage, planting, harvesting, etc., are all required to extract energy from agriculture. But again, they also require energy in order to perform them. So in order to understand how a positive energy feedback cycle took place at Çatalhöyük, the energy investment in these agricultural processes must be determined. Just a brief note on Çatalhöyük. So Çatalhöyük is one of the largest Neolithic sites in Southwest Asia and provides evidence of a flourishing early farming settlement and represents one of the most critical transitions in human history, the agricultural revolution. So we know that agriculture was one of the subsistence practices utilized to extract energy for Çatalhöyük. We also know that population numbers at Çatalhöyük's peak are estimated to have reached between 3,500 to 8,000 people. So sustaining this many people and a site of this size takes significant energy investment and would have required changes in energy flows and resources. So how do we model agricultural energy at Çatalhöyük? In order to form an energy model for a past system, of course, we have to utilize archaeological data and archaeological methods. So here are just some of the data needed to form such a model. So we need to draw from bioarchaeological data. So what is known about diet, physical stresses, which can tell us about labor and mobility and overall health. We also draw from paleo-environmental data. So the catchment area, what kind of resources were available? The land needed for agriculture at Çatalhöyük, was it even available? The archaeobotanical data. So how were domestic cereals used? How were they processed? What was consumed and what was not? And tool data, including stone tool data. What tools would have been used for crop processing, as well as which ones do we not have evidence of, but we can possibly infer from another form, which is ethnographic data and experimental archaeological data, which also gives us time estimates for agricultural processing, activities, and tool use. And I'd like to emphasize that this data that I just went through with you is not just data only available at Çatalhöyük. This is pretty much routinely collected archaeological data. And utilizing experimental archaeological data and ethnographic data is something our discipline also already does. I'm just reframing the archaeological data into a modern human energy requirements framework and putting this all together to make calculations to make an energy model for Çatalhöyük. So before I get started on what this diagram, the numbers, I want to show you how it works. So what we have here is we have Çatalhöyük here at the top, and Çatalhöyük has to invest energy and input energy into agricultural processes, including land clearance, tillage, planting, harvesting, threshing, winnowing. I think you understand it at that point. And so the flow is this way. So what happens here is before you even plant, before the plants even start to grow, Çatalhöyük must invest energy into land clearance, tillage, and planting. Then once these plants are growing, the only way to get the energy is to harvest them. And in order to harvest them, again, Çatalhöyük must invest energy into that process. And from here, in order to get the energy again, we have to do threshing, winnowing, pounding, and grinding, and sieving. All of these also require energy input. And then you finally get the crop output after you process it. And some of that energy goes back into Çatalhöyük this way, and some of it doesn't actually go directly into Çatalhöyük. It goes back into the agricultural process. And as you can see, so here is a Çatalhöyük model of an average individual. Oh, I forgot to mention, we have crop losses and storage losses here. So this is energy lost from the system. So this whole model here is for an average individual at Çatalhöyük. And this number here, the yearly net gain, so how much are they gaining each year, is about 1,500 megajoules. And that doesn't mean a lot if you don't know what that means. So I'll put it on like a normal term, is about 50 tons of charcoal, which is a pretty good amount of energy to get. And so this number here is the one I really want you to pay attention to right now. It's called the agricultural cost, 68%. What does that mean? That means that 68% of the energy that the food produces goes back into these agricultural processes. So that means that Çatalhöyük is only getting 68% of the energy from the food, or is only getting 32% of the energy, and it is costing 68% of the energy that they get. So it's overall, for an individual at Çatalhöyük, agriculture is pretty costly. So now we can go to the Çatalhöyük population, about 1,000. So of course, all of the numbers increase. We have more people, that requires more energy, more food, that requires more work. And we can see here land clearance, tillage, harvesting, pounding and grinding are all significant processes. And we see seed is very significant, as well as crop loss. So the agricultural cost has decreased to 54%. And that kind of makes sense. You have more people working, it's a little bit easier. But it's still pretty costly. You're still getting less than half the energy back, but you are still getting a lot of energy overall for all of Çatalhöyük. You're getting 1.8 million joules of energy, and that's equal to running Watt's 1800 steam engine for about half a year, or 60,000 tons of charcoal. And now here's a model of Çatalhöyük's population at 8,000 people. And as you can see here, one of the biggest things in the picture of this model here is that almost all of the agricultural processes are energy intensive. And this is pretty significant, that almost every single one of them is intensive. However, we are getting a lot of energy from agriculture at this point, 15 million megajoules of energy, which is equal to running Watt's 1800 steam engine for 5 years, or 500,000 tons of charcoal. And we can also see that the agricultural cost has decreased. So this means that finally, after we have this many people, we are actually getting more from agriculture than we're putting in. So I just threw a lot of these diagrams at you with lots of numbers about energy. What exactly do they mean? I have 2 more diagrams, and I promise it's the last one. So on an individual level, well, of course, agriculture provides ample energy. This is without question. We have always known this, and we've talked about it, but we haven't really dove into any other aspects of it. So on an individual level, agriculture is costly. 68% of the energy produced from the food goes back into making it, and that only leaves 32% for other activities. Also individually, land clearance, tillage, harvesting, pounding, and grinding are very energy consuming activities. Also, the individual costs, the fact that they are higher than the settlement cost is really interesting. At this point, one cannot help but think about the differences between individuals or individual households, the importance of differential access to land and resources, and just putting into play the need for group effort in agriculture. We also see the importance of seed. The need to keep the next year's seeds is very important, even on the individual level. And at this point, private storage comes to mind here. Populationally, we see a couple more things. So first, looking just at the input and output costs, the more a population grows, the less costly agriculture becomes for the group. Second, the bigger the population gets, of course, the more and more energy needed to sustain agriculture and its processes. That's not necessarily surprising. A population grows, it needs more energy. We know this, and this happens at Çatalhöyük as well, and now it's modeled. And also the net gain of agriculture increases, and we're getting pretty large amounts of energy from it. But, and for the sake of time, I couldn't show you 3,500 or 5,000 people on the model, but if you can see here, the agricultural cost starts to actually level out when you get more people. So at first we have it as, okay, individual, they're pretty costly, you're not getting that much energy back from it, but then it significantly decreases, and then it decreases by a little, and we're seeing it level out. So at first, yes, you get high energy returns, but group cooperation relaxes that burden of energy input, but only to a certain extent. And overall, if we're putting these both together, we're also seeing a few patterns. So first, modeling this energetically and looking at agricultural processes separately highlights the energy intensity of different agricultural processes and allows for us to compare them on the same scale. So by the time we reach Çatalhöyük's estimated peak population, nearly every agricultural process requires a significant amount of energy to keep it functioning. The need for seed, successful harvest, tillage, pounding, grinding become increasingly more energy intensive. And this brings me to my second point. These agricultural processes are and become energetically dependent on one another, i.e. you can't have seed without having a successful harvest. You can't have a successful harvest if you don't have enough land or get enough land or till correctly or plant the right way. So being reliant upon agriculture inherently means being very dependent on its success. So what happens with a bad harvest? What happens when there's unequal access to the resources needed to perform these activities, or when there's unequal access to land? Now, the models I've showed you today are just 1 year for each of these populations, and I only focused on 4 domestic cereals and agricultural processes. What happens when we bring other human-animal relationships in, wild animals, wild plant inputs, tool production, clay resourcing, feasting? How entangled do these energy flows become, and how reliant upon each other do they become? What happens when we look at this, not just 1 year at a time, but over generations? Now, I don't have all the answers to this, but looking at these things energetically, we can ask these questions, we can model these, and we can do this using routinely collected archaeological data. Which brings me to my final point on these models, that by using Çatalhöyük as a case study, we are already starting to see the early workings of this agricultural energy feedback system. And on this, I just want to leave you with these 3 notes. I hope I was able to show you this, but I just want to emphasize this one more time. That first, I believe that work which focuses on energy can stimulate discussion about the implications for archaeological data and archaeological methods. Routinely collected archaeological data can be used to quantify and model energy systems in the past and help to inform and better understand energy systems today. Second, energetically modeling a past energy system can provide a way to quantify, model, and understand the agricultural energy feedback system I discussed with you earlier and better understand its historical development. And third, excluding the history and development of our past actions and past energy relationships leaves out past unintended or unanticipated consequences. Further, our modern understanding of, quote, sustainability is lacking history and a quantitative measure of the energy interactions of societies, especially those in the past. Reframing archaeological data through an energy framework can help to provide a valuable perspective on quantifying and modeling society-energy relationships and potentially help disentangle the complicated energetic relationships between animals, humans, the local environment, and even the broader Earth system. And I just want to thank you to the Association for Environmental Archaeology for having me at this talk, as well as my PhD supervisors, the Grantham Center for Sustainable Futures, the Department of Archaeology here at Sheffield, and of course, the Çatalhöyük Archaeological Research Project. And thank you for tuning in, and do you have any questions?
Oh, thank you very much, Theresa. That was